All I have in this world is my balls and my word, and I don't break them for no one. Do you understand?
Rightio legends, Chaos Chronicles, and we're back again with another video. And so today we're doing a reaction video on Christopher Flannery, aka Mr-Renta-Kill. But before we get into it, guys, if you haven't already, please, if you guys are enjoying my content, jump down there, shoot me a subscription, and if you hit that little bell icon, you'll never miss any of my clips again. All right, well, let's get stuck straight into it. No mucking around. Chris Flannery, let's go.
It's the mid-1980s in Sydney, and a war is being fought on the streets between rival factions over the control of the city's criminal underworld and its illegal resources. Hardened men who aren't afraid to get their hands dirty become valuable assets to the gangs and played an instrumental role in their drive for gangland supremacy. It was a need for these acts of discreet disposal that turned a nightclub bouncer into a contract killer. Christopher Dale Flannery, aka Mr-Renta-Kill, became a prolific character in Sydney's gangland wars of the 1980s. It was his ability to deliver upon his contract without a second thought that made him a hitman in high demand. However, by the mid-1980s, Mr-Renta-Kill would become a victim of his own success, and after leaving in a taxi to meet his boss, he seemingly disappeared without a trace. In the annals of Australia's criminal underworld, one name seems to pop up time and time again: Christopher Dale Flannery. Alleged to be a hitman with over 15 kills.
So, Chris Flannery very famously started his time in Victoria. He was a Melbourne crook, done prison in Pentridge, was a Melbourne crook. And then all of a sudden, thought it would be a good idea to go to Sydney with another crazy person, Laurie Pendergast. And they just ran amok there. And I think that the way that they acted in Sydney, considering it wasn't even their own home state, like I'm pretty sure that this would happen to anyone if they started going to someone's turf and acting the way that these fellas did. Let's get back into it.
His price for a contract was believed to be $50,000 and bragged that, quote, anyone could be eliminated, end quote. Described as a ruthless killer with psychopathic tendencies by his contemporaries, he was also a devoted family man who could seemingly turn off his killer instinct like a light switch. It was his tendencies like these that allowed.
So his wife, he was well known. His wife used to go everywhere with him. So everywhere he used to go, his wife would go with him, and used to carry around his piece and everything. But like it's very common knowledge that his wife used to go everywhere with him, and it used to piss people off.
Him to found a network of contract killers known as Rent-A-Kill Inc. and place himself as the main operator. So successful was he that corrupt police even sought out his special services. Growing up in the hard working class Melbourne suburb of Brunswick, under the strict and abusive authority of his father, perhaps helped Flannery develop his violent behaviour in later years. Born in 1948 into an abusive home, his father left the family when Flannery was just 9, and he never saw his father again. It was in 1962.
This is a very common thing that I've noticed, and I've said this in other videos before, that like a lot of male prisoners that I've come across in my life, their dad either wasn't in the picture or took off very early on in the piece. And I found that to be very, very common. It's weird, eh? I wonder what, like for me, like my dad was in the picture, but kind of wasn't, if that makes sense. But like, yeah.
When Chris Flannery was 14 years old, that he committed his first crime and was subsequently sent to a boys' reformatory in Melbourne. This would set young Flannery on a life path of violent crime, and by the age of 17, he.
And that's also something that I noticed as well. What I noticed is that a lot of the boys that were sent to boys' homes and like stuff like that, reformatories, they were like, sexually abused And that's why a lot of the crooks in those days ended up the way they did, because it was so rife, and all of those Catholic reformatories and Catholic like homes for boys, like there was a massive royal commission into it, and they are the cause of why a lot of these criminals were the way that they were, or are the way they are today, is because they were out of control with all these bloody PDF file shit.
He was again convicted of theft, housebreaking, and assault, and was sent to Melbourne's Pentridge prison, where he served time in the notorious H Division with a well known Melbourne underworld figure, Mark Chopper Reed. The conditions were appalling, and it wasn't long before fiery tempered Flannery revolted against.
So Chopper is well known for saying that he didn't really like Chris Flannery, and he thought that he spoke shit, and most of the people that he was supposed to have taken out were he was taking other people's raps, you know. But it's kind of funny for Chopper to say that, considering what he was well known for doing as well.
His authorities by staging a hunger strike. This caught the attention of the media and the government, who launched an inquiry into the alleged horrible conditions of the prisoners at Pentridge. Serving 5 years of his 9-year sentence, Flannery was released in 1970. Shortly after release, he began courting a woman he had known years prior to incarceration, Kathleen. It was around this time that Flannery began working as nightclub security for Mickey's Discotheque, a popular nightclub frequented by many of Melbourne's criminal underworld. It was not long, however, before Chris Flannery found his way into a life of crime. Many accounts depict
Wasn't just the criminal underworld that used to frequent Mickey's disco. So the corrupt police also used to go there as well. Um, it's also believed that Skull Murphy had an interest in that as well. That bloke was as crooked as they come.
Flannery as an incompetent criminal, and the story goes that he was charged with armed robbery in 1974, and while on bail, he absconded and fled to Perth, Western Australia. While in Perth, Flannery
Absconded means, for those of you that don't know, like he just took off, he went on the run.
had gainful employment at a menswear store. However, he had to leave his job as
This is what always trips me out about Flannery's story, that he worked in like a men's land store. And considering somebody who's like a hitman, you know, a hard man, it just always, this part of his story always trips me out a little bit, and I just don't understand it.
the law caught up with him, and during a bungled armed robbery at the store he worked at, he was apprehended in Sydney by the king of crooked cops, Detective Roger Rogerson. Allegedly, Flannery paid a bribe to Rogerson to escape conviction. However, after a previous charge of sexual assault in Victoria, Flannery was sent to prison again.
Another one. Another one of these people that we're doing a reaction video on, that was a very big name in the criminal world, that was in prison for sex offences. Like, that is, it literally blows my mind. It was almost a prerequisite back then, it seems. Obviously it wasn't. I'm just saying, it was very common. What the friggin' hell?
For a further 3 years. It was in prison that he confessed to his friend Alan Williams that he was no good at crime, and he had a brilliant idea to cash in on his violent behaviour. Christopher Dale Flannery decided.
So, Alan Williams, there's not really much information to be told about Alan Williams, to be honest. So, he was a heroin dealer. He was a pretty big heroin dealer in Melbourne. And yeah, there's not really much to be said about him, except for he disappeared very earlier on in the piece. And yeah, you never hear any information about him. I might do a video on old Alan Williams. Actually, that's just prompted me an Alan Williams video coming up.
He was going to kill people for money. It was then that Mr-Renta-Kill was born. Recently released from prison, Flannery became Mr. Renta-Kill, and his first contract was Victorian barrister Roger Wilson. Roger Wilson owed money to business partner Mark Alfred Clarkson, but had to declare bankruptcy.
So it's also important to know that from every single person I've ever spoke to about Chris Flannery or that knew Chris Flannery will tell you that this guy was 100% a people pleaser. So like everything he did was to please other people, and so people pleasers are kind of looked down upon in the criminal world. And so he really, really wanted everyone to know that he was a hitman and that he would take anyone out for a certain price. And his eagerness to please would prove to be his own downfall 100%.
Before he could make any repayments. Wilson went missing on Friday, February the 1st, 1980.
Mr. Wilson was last seen here at the factory premises at the corner of Currajong Street and Robbs Road in Footscray on Friday night.
Driving his Porsche on what was then known as the Southeastern Freeway near inner city Richmond.
What I will say that it is alleged that Alphonse Gangitano played a part in that as well, and it's never been proven, but obviously there's been documentaries and stuff about it. But yeah, that one there, it was alleged that Alphonse Gangitano played a part in that one as well.
When he was allegedly pulled over by two detectives in an unmarked car. This was, however, a clever ploy orchestrated by the members of Rent-A-Kill Inc., Chris Flannery and Kevin Weary Williams. According to police files, the two fake detectives handcuffed Roger Wilson, threw him in the back of the unmarked car, and drove to the rural area of Gippsland, east of Melbourne, where Wilson was murdered. The Porsche was moved to Tullamarine Airport, where it was found by Victorian police, and the body was removed.
I used to live right near there, Narnagoon.
And buried in an unknown location. Eventually, Clarkson, Flannery, and Williams were charged with the murder of Roger Wilson, and media outlets chased the story of Flannery, a flashy-dressed hitman for hire. Flannery flaunted his ego and charisma on current affairs television programs.
And what's your answer to that?
It's just ridiculous. Totally untrue.
The men were acquitted of the murder due to lack of a body.
And that's another thing that's always looked down upon by the real crooks is people that flaunt their lavishness and the way they live their life in front of, for everyone to see that they live their life this way, like they're big, tough people and stuff. And so, it's also well known that he was hated for that shit as well. Like he was always about pleasing other people. So he was always putting on a show.
And the star witness, Deborah Boundy, going conveniently missing. Within minutes, just as Flannery walked free from court, he was arrested and extradited to Sydney for the murder of brothel owner Raymond Loxley. Other alleged victims of Flannery were Terry Basham and his de facto partner, Susan Smith. In 1982, a jury failed to reach a verdict on the Loxley murder case, and a retrial was adjourned until 18th of April 1984. Flannery was subsequently acquitted. Flannery's trial had been rescheduled for the 31st of January 1984.
So that means that he was like basically there. He got away with one, and then so they extradited him to Sydney for another one, and they rescheduled his court. So that's what's going on there. So I wonder if he...
After his acquittal, Flannery bought a house in Turella, Sydney, and brought his wife Kathleen and children up.
Well, yeah, he was acquitted. So after his acquittal, so the acquittal means that that's it. There's no more court. That's it. You're acquitted. So, yeah, got away with two at the start then, it turns out.
From Melbourne, Mr-Renta-Kill then went to work as a bodyguard for big-time Sydney crime figure George Freeman. At the time, Freeman and other members of Sydney's criminal underworld were engaged in a violent war over the city's drug trade. And Mr-Renta-Kill...
So this is when he went to Sydney with Laurie Prendergast and started running amok up there and, yeah, started making a name for himself pretty quickly, actually.
Was right in the middle of it.
But was that the right name? As you will see what happens with people with those kind of names.
The genesis of the Sydney Gangland War was the growing drug trade in New South Wales during the 1970s. And it all kicked off with an operation from New Zealand, the Mr. Asia Syndicate. The Mr. Asia Syndicate began operating in New South Wales, Australia in the 1970s with the aid of the Australian branch of the Calabrian Mafia, more specifically, one of its...
I am definitely going to be doing a video on Terry Clark. It is just something that you do not see. So coming up, and yeah, I am definitely doing a video on Terry Clark.
Members, Robert Trimboley. In a nutshell, after the fall of the Mr. Asia syndicate, a power vacuum developed and many factions of Sydney's underworld began warring with each other for control of the trade. The main gangs were the Freeman-McPherson group, led by Lenny McPherson and George Freeman, and the Smith-Henry group led by Nettie Smith and his associate and bodyguard Graham Abbo Henry, who also associated with crooked cop Detective Roger Rogerson. Initially under the umbrella of George Freeman.
So, Abbo Henry, who's still alive, very famously will always say that he never worked with Roger Rogerson. And so it was more Nettie Smith that had the relationship with Roger Rogerson, and it was just that Abbo Henry was mates with Nettie Smith, and I think that's where the crossover gets mistaken there.
Flannery eventually began associating with Nettie Smith with the McCann-Demican group, led by Barry McCann and his associate, a standover man, Thomas Tough Tommy Demican. This feud led to a tit-for-tat spate of killings, and police had tried to negotiate with Flannery to stop the killings. However, by this time, Flannery had fully embraced his Mr-Renta-Kill persona and was reported to have become increasingly unhinged. On the 6th of June 1984, Flannery is alleged to have been the gunman in the attempted murder of Sydney Drug Squad detective Michael Jury. Jury had been the undercover agent involved in a police drug operation which resulted in charges being laid against Flannery's friend, Alan Williams.
I don't get it. How could you not know that that guy is a cop? That guy screams everything. I am a police officer. I don't know how they didn't pick that one up. Like, I always thought that. Like, how did you not pick that one up? It was a big mistake, fellas.
Williams later testified that Flannery had attempted to bribe Jury through Rogerson in order to get the charges against Williams dismissed. When Jury rejected repeated attempts at bribery, Williams claims he agreed to pay Flannery and Rogerson $50,000 each to murder Jury, on what he thought was his deathbed. Later, Jury told detectives he believed he was shot because of the Melbourne job. Later bragging to his mates that, quote, anyone could be eliminated, it seems no one was off limits.
So he was actually holding his child when he was shot too, and was shot with a pretty big gun. I believe it was like a 45 Magnum or something like that.
And if the price was right, he would provide the hit. Flying too close to the sun and fueled by booze and drugs, Mr-Renta-Kill's behavior was now causing concern for his gangland contemporaries. They all wanted him gone. Flannery's feud with Tommy Demican and company had erupted into a series of killings between the two parties, but it was on the 27th of January 1985 that Flannery would be attacked at his family home that would change everything. Around lunchtime on the 27th of January 1985, Flannery and his wife and children had just arrived home when their house was showered with bullets from unknown persons. While no one was seriously injured, Flannery did receive a wound on his hand while he was trying to protect his wife. No one was ever...
What about that? Shooting at someone while they've got their children with them again? Like, that's just putrid, if you ask me, and out of control.
Charged with the shooting, but Flannery blamed Demican for the attempted hit. If Flannery was already volatile, this event sparked his paranoia and his behavior became even worse. It was alleged that George Freeman wanted to end the fighting between Flannery and the McCann-Demican gang, but Flannery wasn't about to bury the hatchet. After the house shooting, Flannery had been hiding out and moving houses, frequently leaving his wife and children at home. In a bizarre attempt to win back favour with his former boss, George Freeman, Chris Flannery shoots his friend, Tony Spaghetti Eustace. His body was found next to his gold Mercedes and bleeding profusely. Barely hanging on to life, Eustace later died at the hospital, and word got out that Flannery was behind the hit. Worried that their gun for hire was on a psychotic killing spree, it's thought that the gangs decided to put a hit out on the erratic hitman. On the 9th of May...
And see, this is what I mean at the start, that type of reputation is only going to end up like this. So, people were using him for what they thought he was good for, and then started becoming concerned because they were like, he's actually out of control and a little bit loose. So the people at the top started to get worried, and you can see why, like just silly things.
1985, Flannery had been living in Sydney's inner city in an apartment close to the CIB headquarters. On this day, Flannery received a call from George Freeman requesting that the two should have a meeting. Unable to start his car, Chris Flannery contacted Freeman again and was then told to catch a taxi. He does this, and as the taxi enters Liverpool Street, Christopher Dale Flannery is never seen again. Several theories surround his disappearance, ranging from being tortured and killed by George Freeman to Nettie Smith's confession of Detective Roger Rogerson shooting Flannery and even living elsewhere under a different name. To this date, no one has ever been charged with his likely homicide.
So yeah, there's a few stories getting around. It's believed. Some people believe that McPherson machine gunned him. Other people believe that the police took him out. So you've got to understand that at the same time, he was making threats to kill police officers as well. And so very corrupt police officers and police officers that wouldn't take these threats very lightly at all. So you've got to understand that he was pissing a lot of people off at the time when he went missing. So, I mean, I guess it's anyone's guess, really.
The disappearance of Mr-Renta-Kill remains one of Australia's greatest gangland mysteries. But what are your thoughts? Let me know in the comments below.
Rightio, legends. Well, there you go. Let me know what you guys think as well, because, there's conflicting stories, there's conflicting documentaries, conflicting series. Even in different series, they say different things happen. So, what do you guys think? If you ask me, I think that the corrupt police was 100% the way he went out. He was making threats to kill against corrupt police officers, their wives, their children. And yeah, that was never going to end well as well. But he was pissing off the wrong people in the criminal underworld as well. But I guess, yeah, his fate was always sealed in that life. And it's always going to be that way. Unfortunately, it will never, ever change. And when someone becomes a threat, it's easier to get rid of the threat than anything else, really. So, but there you go, Christopher Dale Flannery, the bloody AKA Rent-A-Kill. If you guys have got anyone else you'd like me to do a reaction video on, or make my own video on, chuck it down there in the comment section of this video and we will make that happen. All right, guys, I have been the Chaos Chronicles. You guys have been absolutely awesome. Don't do drugs and crime and you won't end up in prison. We out.
The Chaos Chronicles, where the darkness thrives.